Hey everyone, welcome to another Unity tutorial video. This video will be actually a continuation and will be part 2 of the series of how to create a sprite sheet. And you can find that video link in the description in case you might have forgot the process or need to brush up on some things. Alright, so we have our sprite sheet. Okay, when you're ready at that point and you feel things are going well, okay, we'll go back into history real quick just to make sure we're not forgetting any details. Alright, so you may be at this stage. All your images are all laid out evenly on your sprite sheet, including the background, and you say, okay, ready to flatten this out, make it 1, okay? So go to Layer, Flatten Image, hit OK. Alright, so we can't do anything with this, and we need to make sure we get rid of this white space. So right click on background and want to duplicate the layer, and this one we want to give it a name just for future purposes. I'll call it sprite sheet. Okay, the old layer I'm going to get rid of. Alright, then create a new layer by hitting the little plus button right here, dragging underneath. Okay, so you're wondering what's going on is that we're going to turn this into a PNG file so we can use transparency layer in Unity. But right now we don't technically have a transparency layer, and we do and we don't. We have to get what I'm going to do with this, just to ensure things. I'm going to click using the magic wand tool. And this is just, of course, if I use the correct layer. There we go. Make sure you have the right layer selected. Click on the white space. You can either hit delete or you can hit clear up here in edit. Just be very careful when you hit the delete key. You might have something else selected, okay? So at this point, the background is deleted and we're left with an image. So if you feel uncomfortable, great. If not, try to redo the tolerance up here, okay? I think if you increase it, it gives finer detail. Alright, now we don't want to flatten this out. So instead go to File, Export, Export As. Don't do quick export, just do Export As. Save it as a PNG, select Transparency. Make sure you have the correct dimensions as the whole entire sprite sheet. So remember, it was 2160 by 960, and we went over that in the previous video. Okay. Keep scale at 100%, and have bicubic automatic, and same thing, same dimensions as image in the canvas. Okay. Hit export. Make sure you know where you're saving it to, and then what you're going to do is give it a name. Make sure it's saved as PNG. It's very important. Hit save. And I've already done that, so I'm not going to save it. So I'm just going to hit cancel. You just make sure you hit save. Okay. So that's the process with Photoshop. Okay. We're going to leave that now, and we're going to go over to Unity. Alright, so we don't have a character yet. We have to we have to build a character. Alright, so there's going to be many ways to build a character, many different ways to make the programming scripts for a character. You can spend weeks on just getting it right, unless you use some references, build your own. Be very careful about using scripts that are not your own, okay? So always try to do things on your own, and you get a better understanding of how programming works with Unity, okay? So I used a little bit of reference, but overall I used my own script to develop my own script, okay? So, but what we gotta do first is, this is the way I did it. I created an empty game object, and I called it player. So if you're wondering how to create an empty game object, go to game object, create empty, okay? And then just rename it to player, okay? Alright, now I made a prefab before, so I've already gone through the process of making the player. So that way, in case I forget something, I can go to here, reference it, and tell you, hey, do this, okay? So right now there's nothing on the player, and in fact, I could see it in the scene camera, but I go to the game camera, it's like the invisible man, okay? Problem with that is we need to find something called the Sprite Renderer. So go to Add Component, type it in, Sprite Renderer, and then once it's highlighted, click on that. Okay, there's nothing in there just yet, and the problem with that is we have to get our sprite sheet. Okay, so what you do is you can either do two things. I think if you go to the File tab up here called Assets and go to Import New Asset, you do it that way. Okay, go to Import, and I believe if this was in Images, always know where you're saving. This is the long way. So I went in there, and what I did was to import the sprite sheet. I find it and then import it in. Okay, that's one way I did it. The way I like to do things is if you go in and try to find it through the File Explorer. Okay, be careful about using recent files. You know, I don't think you can actually click and drag it in. If you can, great. Just be very careful because things happen with that. Find your file folder, find exact location, click and drag it in. Okay, until you see this little plus symbol here with the arrow, and then click and release it. Okay, so I already did it, and it's already in here. Okay, so with this purpose though, I need to show you how to slice it. So maybe I can get another export in real quick for you. Okay, and I can. Now the problem is here is that it's not sliced into even parts. Okay, and in fact, you can see the one that is evenly sliced up, that's mine, and the new one is not sliced out, which is right here. Okay, we need to make that one more efficient. So click on your new sprite sheet. Okay, at this point you only have one. Okay, so if you have two, you should just have one. Okay, click on the right one, click on Sprite Editor. Here's the sprite sheet. Okay, see how we have the empty space and why we kind of don't need it. Otherwise, if you try to animate this while your character is walking, you're gonna have a nice even white square in the background, and it's going to run into all your textures, and it's going to look like it's some kind of weird man in the bubble thing. Okay, we don't want that. Alright, so what we got to do is we're going to slice this guy up. One thing that we have to do, because this is set at 2D sprite, I believe, this is basically for a single image, and not here, but here, sprite mode. We have to change that first. So select from single to multiple, okay? And that'll open the pathway out once we hit apply to be able to slice our sprite sheet, okay? So when you click here on the Sprite Editor menu on slice, you can use automatic, but you don't know what you're ever gonna get. So the one cool thing is that when we remember our let's say this, our dimensions for our each image. Do you remember? If not, find your, what you can do is go back into your File Explorer, okay, and just find, since all these are now even, that's why we made every single cell or image or frame that we've made. The reason why we made it all specific size is that we won't run into any ununiformal issues, any oddities, any random issues. It's all the same. It's all uniform. Okay, so click on an image, don't double click, just right click. Okay, go to properties, go to details, and that is exactly our dimensions: 360 wide, 480 high. Okay, we don't need to do anything, just remember those numbers. And the reason why we need to know those numbers is we need to input them here. So X is Y. I think it was 360. Hit the tab button on the keyboard or just click on Y and hit 480. Okay, so see the red line? Beautiful part is that it's nice and even now, and what it's going to do along those red lines, it's going to basically like having like one of those big giant paper slicers. It's going to be nice and even cuts right there, and those are going to be your next animation frames. They're going to evenly divide it out. Okay, nothing's going to happen though until you hit slice. But before I hit slice, I'm going to make sure one more time, because it's late at night, that I got the correct numbers. 360 by 480. Okay, if I can confirm that over here, 360 by 480 should be ready to rock. Okay, then you click slice. Okay, and then we hit apply. See how everything became nice and crisp? That's what we wanted. Okay. The lines are basically your boundary lines. The camera is not going to have anything outside here. Everything's going to be represented frame by frame instead of one big sprite sheet. Okay. Now you might find other things in here, padding. You know, really for this, unless you're doing something very specific, sometimes some names can be called like gutter, and you'll see like empty spaces in between. You know, that was the reason why I had it, the dimensions I did on the sprite sheet that I made in Photoshop. That way I didn't have to really mess with all that. So I don't have to do an offset, I don't have to do any padding, and I know not every situation is going to be the same as this one. So just remember, grid by cell size, and your cell sizes, wide, height, everything else is 0. Keep your pivot at center, and then you hit slice. Okay. So let's get out of here, and we'll show the basic changes. Okay. So this is the one that we've done before. This is our new one that I'm going through the process with you. And notice how we have all the frames individually. Okay. It'll be kind of hard to see right now, and that's fine. Okay. So you need to get a sprite in there to start off with. Okay. You can do it 2 ways. I can go basically have a pre-image already. Okay. And you can go and click and drag it and let loose. I think that'll work, but I'm going to grab a single frame, which is the idle right here. Okay. Gonna select the player, click and drag it up to the sprite. Okay. And there you go. Your player is just showing up. And the problem is, though, that's not going to make sure it works. Okay. In fact, if we play the game at the stage and if it loads, if I'm hitting the keys, nothing happens. Jump, nothing happens. Okay. WASD keys, nothing. Okay. We're not done yet. Alright. So we'll go to the next step of the process. We'll make sure, one, we have the rigid body, so it can like bump into things, bump into the ground. You don't want to use rigid body. This is a flat 2D project, so we're going to use rigid body 2D. Okay, let's add that. Okay, then we gotta give it, because I'll just simply just kind of give it gravity and detect collision. We gotta give it some boundaries. So we want to add a box collider 2D to our character. Okay. Alright, and you can check your boundary area. That's pretty high. Okay. Defining the ground is going to be crucial, because this is going to be, in theory, how you make dimension to your character. Alright. So you don't want this to be your character's force field or physical being. So when you bump into them, you're going to bump into them and fall down here. That'd be kind of weird. Be kind of cool though if somebody's running at you and you have like a force field, but in this case I'm going to keep it to about right here. Okay, and I'm going to bring the floor up for the for the box collider about halfway up the feet, and the reason why is when it makes contact with ground, and I'll show you that all about that in a second, it'll stop halfway in, and the feet will be under just a little bit into the ground, and it'll show like kind of like a floor dimension. For the head, just right at the hair. Okay, so we got that going on. Next, you want to create a ground, kind of like a ground plane, and same process. Create empty object. I'm going to name it ground. Okay, and since I already have, ground rather than ground, which with capital G, it'll help me show you the process. So again, Sprite Renderer. So add that, and go to here, Box Collider 2D. Okay, so this will be what will help keep the player in check on the ground. Okay, this will have the player touch the ground. Okay, and if I go in to make sure that it's correctly sized, it is clearly not. Okay, and you're wondering like what's going on here. Like, not only can I not see anything, I literally, where's my sprite? I don't know what to do. Well, we gotta spread it out a little bit here. So let's go ahead and do that. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to actually delete this entirely. Okay. So let's do it a little bit of smarter way. Okay. I'll call this ground and spread it out way more. And you know what? I'm actually going to do this a little bit smarter way. So just go to 2D object, sprite square. Okay, so that'll be my ground, and you can choose to do it any other way you want. So once again, the official way of doing this for me is go to game object, 2D object, sprite square. Okay, and I'm going to name this as officially ground. That'll be our ground. Now, it's not quite the size that we need. And what I'm going to do is increase the X scale on this guy. Okay. Going to run it in, adjust the translates just a little bit outside the camera, and then move it down to the ground. And the cool thing is, once you make a ground, you can duplicate it. You can have multi-platform for your game. Okay. And we add a box collider 2D to this guy, and once we have that set up, notice how the tabs have formed to the size. Sorry, the box collider is formed to your sprite. Okay. So that's our ground, and I'm going to delete it because, and you don't delete it, I already have one here. Okay, and I've already moved it in place. So, the cool part about that is I believe once we hit play, our new player will actually, our player should touch the ground. Let's double check. Yep, see how the feet are in there. And right now, nothing's happening still with my WASD keys or my arrow keys on the keyboard, because I haven't set anything up for the script portion of this, okay? Alright, so let's see. We've converted the sprite sheet, imported the sprite sheet, sliced the sprite sheet, created an empty game object, which is our player, added a sprite renderer. Going through the list here, add idle frame 2, which we did. Alright, we added the rigid body. Did we add the rigid body? Long list of things I made here. Alright, next. We did the idle. Okay, so we're going to go to the animator. And this one's already from a previous player, okay? Which is this guy here, I believe. Okay. Yeah. This is going to be blank. Once you create the idle frame, it's going to create a new section, a new node. This is just the idle portion of your animation. So when the game plays, it's going to immediately start playing this idle animation that you've created, which is great. Okay, that's the easiest part. Not only have you created the animator, which should be in there. If it's not, add one in, okay? And in this case, since I already have an animation controller, click into player and select a controller, drop it into controller, okay? Alright, so let's double check I haven't forgotten anything. Got animator, box collider, rigid body, character 2D, that's our next thing we have to do, which is a script, and our sprite renderer, okay? So, got all those situated: animator, box collider 2D, rigid body 2D, sprite renderer. Need a script now, okay? But before that, we gotta add our walk node into our player, okay? So what you do is, if in the event that, like, something happens, oops, easy way is, because we need to be able to select individual frames or sequences, click on the first frame of your run cycle, hold down the shift key, left click on the end of your run cycle. Okay. Now, clicking and dragging it to your player will open a window, and it's going to ask, hey, I could tell you want to create a new animation, okay? I named it walk, and save as type animation, and hit save. Okay, that'll create a whole other animation, and I'm going to actually do that for you, and it's going to call it walk 2. But you're going to call it walk, okay? Since I already have a walk up there. Alright, notice how the node popped up, okay? This is our animation walk cycle, okay? So when the game plays, our plan is for it to immediately start playing the idle animation, which is 1 frame. It only stands there, and that's what we want to do, so therefore it's animating, you know? So there you go. Now, some animation controllers will just individually play these back and forth, okay? You gotta be very careful with that, because sometimes hitting a key and holding it down and having a special programming script, you'll keep calling this multiple times again and again, and before you know it, like in Windows operating system, you hold the key down, it's gonna basically, if you hold down A on the notepad and just hold it down, eventually it's gonna keep going, it's gonna keep typing A, you know, before you know it, you're gonna have lots of A's. Just like this, you'll be playing idle multiple times, it's gonna eat up your memory, and you're gonna end up eating up your program. It's gonna crash. So instead of that, I want to make a transition from idle to walk based on a parameter, okay? I'm gonna hit Control Z. Don't do that though, because I need to restore my animator back to its glory. Okay, there we go. So I'm using the official walk. Alright, and I'm gonna eliminate the transition though, because that's where we're at this stage. Click on idle, right click, make transition. Don't push anything, just move your mouse down. Once you feel it snap visually, left click. Okay, so when we hit a key, it's going to go from idle to walk. Alright, now at this point, we need to create, we find these little tabs up here. We need to create a parameter, a condition basically to move from idle animation to walk cycle. Okay, and that'll be shown in the script that's coming up in a second, where a condition changes it from false, the square will be empty, to true. If that condition is true, play the walk animation. Okay, so the way you do that, you hit the plus button, create boolean, which is true or false, yes or no. You can be 0 and 1, even in colors. I think it's like black and white. And I'll type in walk 2, but you're going to type in walk, okay? Alright, so don't mess with the check buttons. You're going to leave it empty, okay? And I am going to delete that, so make sure you have walk in there, okay? So next step, click on the transition here. Alright, got all the information. I'm going to have it has exit time checked on, okay? Some people have it checked off. Play with this. If it works for you, great. If it's checked on, great. If it doesn't work, check it off, try that out. Sometimes it can vary. Have conditions, which is your parameters here. Okay, parameters here are the same as conditions here. We want to add a condition. Basically a condition from idle to walk. You know, what would be a permissible pathway, you know, to go from here to here, the reason why it's acceptable, okay? Hit the plus button, since we already have the walk in there, select it from the pull down menu, and this is where it's going to get tricky, because you'll have to kind of play test it, especially if you're doing custom script development. I know it's true, but I had to kind of rehearse this before on the script to make sure it was true. So sometimes a logic error, you think it's true and you won't get the effect that you want, when in reality you had set it false in your script. So this is what playtesting is about. So I know that I had set it to true, and your animator is set up for your player. Okay, now we still haven't done the script yet, but that's coming up right now. So add a script. This is going to be a custom script, and do your research on scripts. There are many different types of character movement scripts, and you can spend weeks in developing them and they still won't be perfect. I heard even teams will have a devoted section time to either developing a script, or they'll have one guy and his one job will be literally develop the character movement script. It could take a couple weeks, it could take overnight. Depends on what you need. So add component, and we're going to type in new script. Okay. So once you hit that, and well, I guess I'll go through this process real quick. In theory, new script, give it a name. Okay. I think I call my auto run character 2D movement. Okay. And remember, you can either, it really depends on how serious you want to make your programming, but remember your camel casing. Okay. If that helps anyway, if that is somewhat camel casing. Okay. But I think I just did this. Okay. Once you hit that, you should be hitting create and add, okay, and that'll give you a new script. I've already created a script for this character, so if you find that you do have a script and it's working, what you do is click on your script, make sure you know where your character script is. If you got a lot of scripts, put them in a folder, okay? You can always go to right click, create folder, okay? Click on the player, click, hold down, and drag it until you see a little line show up, the blue line, and let it go. Okay. So let's see what the script's got going on. I'm going to go to the other camera. So click on the three dots, left click on edit script, go to Visual Studio. I'm going to switch over to the camera right now. Alright, so one of the final stages, okay? So here's our script. Alright. Got our public variables that we saw in Unity, the movement speed, the jump force. You may need to play with this a little, okay? And I'll go back to my previous settings. These are the numbers you'll dial in, and this is our public bool. The boolean for flipped, if you need it in there. I don't think I actually have it in there, so I'm actually going to, because we already have a flip for the Sprite Renderer, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this guy. Even when you rehearse this YouTube video stuff does not go as planned at all. So any changes, I'm just going to redo. Okay. Alright, so to start, we grab the rigid body from the character. The rigid body 2D on the character. This will create gravity, collision detection, all kinds of things, okay? Make sure you have public variable for your animator and your private variable for your rigid body 2D, okay? Which will be here. Alright, in your update section, which is going to be basically running, I think, every frame, I believe. Put a private void update. Alright, and we're going to create a variable for movement, and it's going to detect the horizontal keys for movement. So usually that's A and D, or left arrow, right arrow, okay? So that's what it's basically, detecting movement in a sense. It input. So remember the word input. So it says, hey, if you push one of the sideways keys, left or right, A or D, okay? It's basically going to get that input. And this here will be creating the movement itself, okay? I think this mathematical formula, just moving the transforms based on the vector 3 and the time of delta, okay? And the movement speed. So multiplication a couple times, okay? So here's the conditional if statements. You can have multiple if statements, which I did, okay? It's just the way I did it. And basically saying, hey, if the movement is not 0, and it's approximately, it's basically saying start walking. Well, no, this is the rotation. My apologies. This is the rotation. Okay, so if I am correct on this, all right, let's make sure. Basically, if it detects any movement, it's not sitting still. It's going to basically start rotating in that direction, whatever you pressed, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And then it's going to set the condition in your animator, those nodes from before in the animator. It's going to set that walk condition to true. That's going to trigger your animation. This basically says if idle, so if it's idle, set your boolean to false, so it's going to stop animating. And it's going to, just for rest assurance, well, it's going to set the boolean to false. Okay, so yeah. That way when it recycles back to idle, it starts playing again, it won't immediately jump to walk. Okay. The animation won't transition immediately from from idle to walk. It won't transition from idle to walk. It'll go back to idle and stop right there. Okay. All right, and that'll be basically if there's no movement at all. Okay. All right, and let's see. This will keep the rotation at 0. So if you're facing right, it's going to face right. If you're facing left, it's going to face left. Okay. I'm sorry. Left, right. Okay, 0, 0, 0. So X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. This will keep it facing left. And that'll work. What I did, because what's going to happen is no matter what direction you go, you're going to be facing forward or to the right. And what I did in this case, you'll see in a second. So here's the section for your jump, adding velocity, and the get button down jump is generally designated as, from the old computer programming pioneer days, it's already been pre-designated as a spacebar button. There's a whole list of the inputs. You can find them on the internet. Okay, so basically, your rigid body, add the force, okay, X and Y, which is vector 2, and basically adding the impulse, okay? So that's very important for the jump. Okay. So this is the point where we start flipping the character back and forth, okay? Didn't want to do it up here because weird things start happening and I just didn't feel very comfortable with it. And all these character controller scripts are going to be different. And I haven't, to be honest, I haven't done a 2D character in a while, so I want to make sure I just made it simple for you and me too as well. Alright, so if I basically push, if I push the key, the A key down, what I'm going to do is grab the Sprite Renderer and flip it. Whenever it was facing to the right, now it's going to flip to the left because it's true, okay? And in case I need to go back, if I start walking to the right rather than to the left, I tell it to grab the same component and call for false, so it'll face back to right. So right here. This one's for the left, this one's for the right. Okay, remember to make sure good comments on your scripts. That way, in case somebody in the future says, hey, what's this thing doing? They don't gotta give you a phone call or text message or DM and say, hey, what's going on? Because you might get one of those in the middle of the night if it's overseas, you know. or maybe just somebody like me who's working at 3:53 a.m. Yeah. All right. Okay. So left face, right face, the controls. Now you can also input, if you can find the input get key down for left arrow, right arrow, go ahead and do that. It's just more easier to have a character walk if you're using a keyboard with the WASD keys. At this case I'm just using A and D, okay? Now if I let the key up, it's going to make sure it stays true, because sometimes what will happen, the character will immediately flip back to the right, okay, rather than if he's facing to the left. All right? And the same thing goes with the D key. Once I let up off the D key after depressing it, it's going to make sure it's facing false, okay? That is pretty much everything with the script. Go ahead and rewind, just to kind of get through the script and type it in. You're welcome to use it. All right. So let's go through real quick in case you need to go and type things in. Alright, and then make sure you just hit the recycle or the restart button, and it'll update your script. Okay. So we'll go back to Unity. Alright, and what you should have displayed is here, character 2D controller script with the movement speed and your jump force. We'll give Unity a second. Because we did change one variable, I believe. We got rid of the flipped. So some changes have been implemented. And if it does happen that you have none animator, click and drag your player, drop it in. Okay? Alright, so things should be pretty good. Let's test it out and see if we need to make any changes to the numbers here. Okay? Alright, so it's animating very slowly. It's almost like he's walking on one of those treadmills in the airport. Now keep in mind, the character's not flipping. It's a major issue. Well, not major, it's semi-major. This was actually embarrassing because I realized I was using the wrong keys. So, alright, so if you're going to use the arrows, it's going to be way different than the A and D key, okay? So if I use the arrow keys, it's going to act way different than if I use the WASD keys for movement. So now it's actually working pretty good. So if you want to have full versatility on the keyboard and, using movement keys from the arrow keys, you can input that in as an OR statement. And if you're wondering what an OR statement is, like and, if, I think it's and or, you can actually go in here. And the symbol for and is two ands, and you can add in the input dot key down to this other section over here. But what you want to do is you want to actually use an OR statement. So if either OR is pressed, it's going to do the following in here. And you put input dot key down, and you have to find the listing for if it was D on the WASD keys, this would be for the right arrow on your keyboard. Okay. Same thing for here, and same thing for here. You would add in the OR symbol and just input that in. So I forgot about that. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, and just make sure this is redone. So we go back to Unity real quick, and this has been a lengthy tutorial, but we've gone through quite a bit. So redo the game real quick. Never update your scripts while your game is playing. It could cause a very bad crash. If you haven't had any saved work, you might have actually earned an extra 2 hours of work. So this character is moving a little slow if I use the A and D key. And I think with my previous character, we had it set at 4 for the movement speed and 5 for the jump force. Your character may be faster, slower. Character might not move at all. So make sure you put in some time to test it. So I had a 4 and a 5. Got our animator set up. We should be ready to go. And I'm going to test it out real quick. So he's moving better. Okay. Now I made this adjustment while playing the game. So if you see here, when I stop the gameplay, it's going to return back to 1. So nothing's going to be finalized until you stop the game and input them in after. So I'm going to do one more test, and then I'll test the jump on this to make sure. Now I don't have an actual jump cycle drawn. Maybe that'll be for another video time. So he's moving pretty good. You may get this weird stick though. This is more designed for a D-pad on a Nintendo controller. You have separate left and right buttons. If you hold down to the left and go to the right, you may get this weird like moonwalk thing backwards. That requires more, I wouldn't say better programming, be more detailed programming. Okay, those things happen. If I use the W key, nothing happens because I didn't make a section for what to do for W. The only thing I can do is have the character either jump with W or have the character look up. And it might be a specific reason for that. Or if we design maybe on a future tutorial for ladders, I can use W for a ladder climb. Okay, something for later. And S would be for crouch, but I didn't make a crouch for this at all. I'm sure we could do that for a later time too. Okay. So there you have it. Oh, and if we hit the spacebar, character jumps. May not be that very high. You can also increase it to like 7. I do believe this is a float variable for the jump force, and it literally takes a little bit of playing with before you make the final decision. Maybe 6, maybe 5.9. I believe it's a float variable or decimal. So click on that. So 5.9, maybe 5.8. So it takes some dialing in. That's why I like public variables. You can sit there and play again and test it out. And so it really depends on what the functionality of your player. You know, is it Mario from Super Mario Brothers? Mario can jump super high. You may have a character that can too. You know, that's what the cool thing about creating a custom character 2D controller movement script is, that sky's the limit. As long as you have an imagination and the know-how to program, you can have like a double jump. You know, if you hit a particular key twice, you know, or just once, or holding it down. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Rewind if you have any questions. Add questions to the comment box. Please subscribe. That really helps out to me as an individual. You know, it tells me what you guys are interested in. At the same time, it would be kind of cool to get more viewers to this channel as well. And have yourself a great day.